Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the
Geek Buddies!
Hey! Yeah. Michael, you're going to have to buy Shannon an Ethernet cord, I think, going forward. So we're going to have to figure that out going forward. He's a little fuzzy right now, but we'll figure it out.
Fuzzy?
Yeah, you're a little fuzzy.
I thought that's how he looked last time I saw him in person, so I just thought that was normal.
That's because of how much Michael drinks. Everything looks a little fuzzy.
That's what it is.
You bought the pills. Never mind. All right, we're going to get into a bunch of geeky goodness here on the show today for sure. We're going to talk a little bit of some Marvel animation stuff on the heels of What If, or on the precipice of What If, coming out this week, or came out already as we're recording this for sure. We're also going to talk about some Chloe Bennet updates, some new Addams Family casting situations, and we're going to get into this big news on Tim Drake going on in the world of Batman. We're going to cover all of that here on this episode of the Geek Buddies. First of all, we should introduce ourselves. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, writer, producer, and host here on the Outlaw Nation and the Geek Buddies.
I am Michael Vogel. I'm a writer and producer of animated TV shows and movies.
And this is Shannon McClung. I'm an animation writer and a television actor where you may have seen me on Silicon Valley, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Modern Family.
Yeah, good resume, good resume. And the way this whole thing works is each of us brings up a geek news item. We talk about it amongst ourselves, take a little bit of a mini break, then jump into our main news topic. We're going to talk about Marvel animation and the plans going forward for Marvel animation. There was an interview given by the executive producer, or one of the producers rather, on over there at Marvel Animation, talking about what is coming after the What If series drops. For sure, we're going to get into that. For those of you coming back and be part of the Geek Buddies crew, thank you very much. For those of you new, thanks again thanks for taking a chance on us. Let's get into it. Mike, take it away.
All right. Well, as John alluded to, there is big news in Gotham City this week. In Batman Urban Legends number 6, a story from creator Megan Fitzmartin, Balan Ortega called Some of Our Parts. Tim Drake was asked out on a date by a boy, and he said yes.
Hello.
So, for those who are not super familiar with the Batworld, Tim Drake is the third of the Robins, of the characters and heroes who have taken on the Robin mantle. The first Robin would be Dick Grayson, who went on to become Nightwing, and pretty much everyone is aware of the fact has the nicest butt in the DC universe.
Oh my!
The second Robin was Jason Todd, who is most famous for being killed by the Joker and coming back as the Red Hood. He is the Robin with the chip on his shoulder. The current Robin is Damian Wayne, the son of Talia al Ghul and Batman, but the third Robin was Tim Drake. He's been Robin for quite some time. He went on to become Red Robin. He became Drake. He's all over the place with his hero names. But in this latest comic that just came out this week, he, as I was saying, he has a friend. He rescues his friend. His friend tells Robin, not knowing it's Tim Drake, that he wishes he could have finished his date with Tim. And Tim Drake has kind of one of those light bulb moments. They actually wrote about this in the comic, that he has this light bulb moment where he realizes that maybe there was something that he wanted that he wasn't facing before, and he goes and says yes to this date. And so DC has kind of come out and said that Tim Drake is now bisexual. So this is really big news. It's really cool. And it's actually really cool that he is bisexual and not gay, because as most people know, he's had a long-term on-again, off-again relationship with Stephanie Brown, aka Spoiler. And this doesn't actually negate anything like that. Like, bisexuality is an often misunderstood and maligned part of the LGBTQ community that deserves a lot of us, as big a spotlight on it as our gay characters and our lesbian characters. And so the fact that they've chosen to do this with Tim Drake is pretty big. And the fact that they've done it with one of the Robins, which is one of the top tier levels of the DC universe as far as heroes goes, is pretty cool. So far the reaction seems to be pretty positive online for the most part, and everyone seems pretty happy to welcome Tim Drake to the LGBTQ plus family. What do you guys think about this?
Shannon?
I mean, Judd Winnick had a great tweet yesterday. Judd Winnick of the Real World, San Francisco fame, who's gone on to become a very prolific comic book writer. Someone he had
a fan of the show. Shout out to
and a fan and a friend of the show.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
and synonymous with the Red Hood himself.
Yes. Great
he
point.
was the one who wrote. Yeah, he was the one who wrote Under the Red Hood. Correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess he wrote a comic fairly recently where Superboy and Tim Drake were in a closet for something, and someone tweeted at him and said, why were they in the closet? Like, I don't understand why they were there. And he tweeted back very humorously, I saw this as an opportunity for them both to come out of the closet. And I was like, oh, that's funny. But yeah, look, I mean, bisexual people exist, and I think this is a good introduction to be like, hey, they can be anybody, like they can be Robin. So the fact that they're doing this, and the fact that the reception, at least from what I've seen, has been generally very positive, is very encouraging. I mean, there are times in the geek sphere where people can get a little gatekeepy, a little angry if there are alterations made to their favorite characters. And that doesn't really seem to be the case, at least thus far. So I see it as a very encouraging sign.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think this is the thing at the end of the day for me. It's why not? We see and know bisexual people in our lives, in our work, in our friendships, our extended friendships, what have you, our families. It's all there. And so the idea that this is somehow like, some kind of difficult thing to conceive of or accept, I think is I think we're starting to move past that. Yes, there's still the vocal minority that makes those comments and comes out and gets all upset about it and makes those videos that get a bunch of views. But in the end, progress keeps moving forward, and they keep making these changes, keep pushing forward, no matter what anybody says. And I think this is a great character to explore that with and see what we can get. Tim Drake's good-looking dude. Let's see what we got. Both sides. Maybe it's a way for people who are maybe a bit averse to it and may not know they're averse to it to like read this story and get a better understanding, a more layered, nuanced understanding of what bisexuality can be, and destroy the stigma of it, destroy the otherness of it overall. Right. And why not do it in the comics, where sometimes they have been progressive in the comics and changed people's points of views about certain things, about cultures, about people of color, about women, about whatever. It happens. So I think this is a positive all around. The other side, there's another part of me that says, great that you've done this. Now you've got to take responsibility for this and do this correctly. Don't just throw it away 5 issues later, Mike. That's
it would be a shame.
Yeah.
It would be a shame if Tim Drake went on a date with a boy and then never mentioned it again for the next 20 years of comics. I totally agree. I was like, if you're going to go down this road, let's make this a part of who he is, and let's make this something that he's figuring out and exploring as part of his adventures as Tim Drake. I think the other part that's kind of interesting, just for a real, quick little tidbit into comic book history, is that, Batman and Robin, in general, there have been plenty of jokes throughout the years about them. They're the inspiration for the ambiguously gay duo. But true. On a more serious side of things, in the history of comics, like back in the 1950s, there was a psychiatrist named Frederick Wortham who wrote a book called Seduction of the Innocent that was all about how comics were like rotting kids' brains and making things horrible, and were ruining kids and making like just fucking with their heads. And one of the big things that he harped on was that Batman and Robin were a relationship that painted a paternal wish fulfillment of two homosexuals living together. Ooh. And it was so bad. This is where the comics code came from, because like the comics, DC, Marvel, everybody got so worried because comic sales were tanking that this is where the comics code came from, where for years there was this sort of censorship of comics. And it's where the creation of Batwoman came from originally. Like Batwoman was actually created to kind of be the, hey, they're not gay character. And that's where we kind of got Kathy Kane, who we know as Batwoman today. And so when they brought her back, they made her lesbian to sort of kind of give a fuck you to Frederick Wortham and the comics code. And so I think it's kind of cool that Tim Drake is now stepping into that role too, and kind of being more progressive and being more complete and fully who he is, and living as his authentic self now, as sort of a reaction to the fact that he's one of the original reasons that the comic code came into existence in the first place. Yeah. So just a little kind of fun history there.
That's fantastic, actually, Mike. Do you think that there's room for this to be an exploration rather than an acceptance of his permanent lifestyle or permanent point of view? Do you think, because that does happen? Am I wrong on this? Can you correct me on this? Does this happen down the road that eventually a bisexual person does decide to go one way or the other, or is it wide open that they can be on both sides or stay one lane or whatever? Is it more of a wide open thing?
They can do whatever they want.
And I'm asking for a place of ignorance.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good question. I think a frustration that a lot of bisexual people have is this idea that people assume that they are eventually going to choose one or the other. That, I was bisexual for a while and then realized I was gay, or I was bisexual for a while and said, no, I'm straight. And people who are bisexual, the bisexual community is like, no, we are bisexual, meaning that we are attracted to whatever. I have friends who are in cisgender relationships, a kind of a man and a woman who are married, where one of them in the relationship is bisexual, and they're like, yes, I chose to marry the other gender, but I am still attracted to both because that's what it means to be bisexual. So I do think that it'll be interesting. What they did choose to do with Tim, which I think is good, is to have him sort of, like I said, like they literally wrote it into the script, this light bulb moment where there was something that he had sort of not fully realized that he's now stepped into, which I think is true for a lot of people. Yeah. And as far as what you're saying about exploring it, I think there's a lot there. I mean, I think that on the Marvel side of things, when they had Bobby Drake kind of realize he was gay in the way they did it, which is an entire Bobby Drake from the past came forward into the future and realized he was gay, which kind of forced the older Bobby Drake to say that he was gay, and that was a whole thing. But by doing that, they really explored this idea of what it was like to be in the closet in the 1960s when Bobby Drake originally was an X-Man versus coming out of the closet in modern day. So I think there's like a lot of really interesting ways. Comic books being this crazy world with superpowers and time jumps and multiverses and all the things that we talk about every week on the Geek Buddies kind of allows you to sort of explore these issues of self-identity and figuring out who you are and where you fit in a little bit of a unique way that most other mediums can't do. So I do hope that they continue to do that with Tim. It could be really, really fun and interesting.
Yeah.
Now, to John's point about wanting to do it correctly, Mike, I mean, or John, I mean, I think you guys would know better than I. Have there been instances in the past where a publisher or a writer has chosen a particular path for a character to go down, whether it be sexual identity or whatever, and then for whatever reason it didn't resonate, or they just choose to the next writer comes along and decides they don't want to do that? Is there an example of that happening in the past? I don't know.
As far as specifically on the sexual orientation front, I'm not sure. I would have to check, and I'm sure people in the comments can let us know if you know something about this that we're not picking up on. But that I don't know that there's a character that sort of one creative team sort of outed or said that they were one thing or attracted to somebody or felt a certain way, and then the next creative team kind of did a take backsies. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that that's happened, although I think there's probably a good chance somewhere along the line that did happen. I think when we look at representations of women, different races, different all kinds of things in the big or wider history of comics, you can see lots of places where you look back and you're like, ooh, that didn't work out really well. But I think that's more of a cultural thing of where they were at the time versus now. But I think as far as modern comics and characters that fall under the LGBTQ plus spectrum, I think most of it, as far as people who embrace that side of things, it's been pretty positive. As you said, there are always people who are not thrilled about these things. But I, for one, am not one of them, clearly. So I say, Tim, congratulations. We'll see you at Gay Pride.
Hey-o. All right. Shannon, let's move on to what you've got for us this week.
Well, so Netflix, I don't know if we talked about this when it actually came out, but back in February, Netflix greenlit a series based around the Wednesday Addams character from Al Gough and Miles Miller, very big TV writers, TV producers. And Tim Burton I don't know if he's directing the entire series, but he's definitely directing the pilot. And Jenna Ortega, who was cast as Wednesday Addams, some of you might recognize her from the second season of You. She also does a lot of VO work. Well, finally, they have cast her parents. They have cast Gomez and Morticia Addams, and I think these choices are fantastic. Luis Guzman is going to be our new Gomez, and Catherine Zeta-Jones is going to be Morticia Addams. Now, these are just guest roles. I mean, the story is really focused around Wednesday at the Nevermore Academy. Academy, which is kind of like a private school. And she's also dealing with the fact that she has sort of a burgeoning psychic powers. There's a murder mystery. I mean, there's a lot going on. So I don't think they're going to be in the show a ton. But the fact when they do show up, when they have the inevitable parent-teacher conference, it's going to be Luis Guzman and Catherine Zeta-Jones. Gentlemen, what do we think of this casting?
It's totally out of the box in one way. Guzman is not someone I would have remotely thought of for this, and that makes me love it because that's kind of interesting. And Luis has been acting for numerous decades, and people love him. I mean, that whole subplot line with him and on Community was one of my favorite things about Community, for God's sake. So I love when he gets a chance to show what he can do in certain movies or TV shows, and having him be a part of this is very interesting. And Catherine Zeta-Jones, which is a name we haven't heard that much recently. Great to see her kind of stepping into this situation and working with Tim Burton and bringing a whole new interpretation to, is it Morticia Addams? So I love it. And there have been so many great actresses who have played Morticia, both on camera and in voiceover. So it's great to see her kind of following the steps of so many great actresses and seeing what her spin's going to be on it. Love this combo. Luis Guzman, I mean, honestly, once again, John Astin had such a kind of fun nobility to what he was doing. Then you have Raul Julia, which is epic nobility. Now you've got something completely different. It can still be noble, but more of a grounded, more of a blue-collar nobility, which I'm looking forward to seeing from Luis Guzman. And so I'm excited for this combination. And shout out to Jenna Ortega. Shout out to her for getting that role. It's going to be a lot of fun. Latinos, finally, I'm alive to see this happening in so many franchises. I'm excited to see this. Mikey, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think I'm trying to think of the way to say this that doesn't doesn't as a knock on Luis Guzman, who I think is great. When you look at the original Gomez Addams artwork, he doesn't necessarily have that nobility or charm that came out in the Addams Family TV show that then was followed up by the movies. And so I think that he looks a lot more the part of Gomez from the original Charles Addams
interesting.
Comics.
Gotcha.
That kind of matches with what Morticia is. And I think like it's a great, as far as like a new take on Morticia and Gomez, it's fantastic. I think, but basically, not that I wasn't excited for this Wednesday Addams show, but anytime that you have something that's really kind of a high concept departure from what we know of, it's always like, okay, well, we'll see. It could be amazing. It could be a little bit of a misfire. And this casting is the thing that has me the most excited, and they're just guests. So kind of to Shannon's point, it's like, I'm most looking forward to seeing these two show up now, and I hope they show up enough. Otherwise, I'm going to be like, well, I want to go see that show. That's the show I'm excited about. But we'll see. I'm very curious about the series, so I am excited to see what it is.
All right.
Yeah, I mean the original Addams, the cartoon or the strip. Gomez. That's what they kind of modeled the animated movie off of, which is Oscar Isaac and Charlize Theron. I can't wait to see. I mean, Luis Guzman, he is a little guy. I mean, he's true. Like 5'4", 5'5", and not that Catherine Zeta-Jones is an Amazon by any. I think she's like 5'7" or 5'8". They're going to put her in heels. Like visually, those two as a pair are going to look fantastic. I mean, I don't think we know when the show is coming out yet. My guess it wouldn't be until probably deep into 2022. But the idea that, again, the parent-teacher conference at the Nevermore Academy, it's Luis Guzman and Catherine Zeta-Jones, hilarious.
This is the one piece of artwork I found with him. Kind of was, I like it. I'm down with it. It's so good. So good. All right. So do we have an idea of when that might be coming out? It hasn't even gone into production yet, has it?
I don't even think it started filming yet.
Okay.
So again, my guess is that any of the articles, none of them say anything. So I'm guessing 2022 at least.
Okay. All right. Well, if a show that is in production or was in production is the Powerpuff Girls CW pilot. We talked about it before on the show, so we thought we'd follow up with this big news that dropped earlier today. Chloe Bennet has exited the project. She has stepped down as one of the three leads, according to Variety. She was set to star as Blossom in the pilot, which is currently titled Powerpuff. Remember that a pilot had been shot And then there were issues with the pilot. They sent it back to be reworked. There were scheduling conflicts, according to her, people that forced her to exit. Instead, casting for a new third Powerpuff Girl is supposed to begin in the fall. Dove Cameron remains attached to the show as Bubbles, while Yana Perot is still attached to play Buttercup. What do you think about this whole situation here, Mike and Shannon? Because I always thought this, in my own personal, I always thought this was a weird step for Chloe Bennet to take in career after you've been establishing yourself in a Marvel universe and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And yes, I know it's not 100% hooked up into the canon of the MCU. To me, it seemed odd to take a step to play one of three girls in this, say, live action situation. I thought maybe a lead of another show would be what's calling her next. So I just thought this was an odd choice because this is Powerpuff Girls, not Chloe Bennet and the Powerpuff Girls. And so I just thought it was an odd choice for me. So seeing her walk away from this, I think it might be for the best. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, Blossom is the de facto leader of the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah, I guess
she is. I mean, Blossom is the leader, and Buttercup is the mad one, and Bubbles is the cute and the ditzy silly one. So, I mean, I think that basically what I'm saying is I have no idea what the script was. I know they're reworking it now, but I would assume that Chloe Bennet was the lead of the show. Like I would assume that the Blossom character is most likely out of the three. Obviously, it's an ensemble piece. Obviously, all three are going to be really important to the story and everything, but Blossom would probably be the focus, I would assume.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and also, I mean, yes, she was on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for 6 or 7 seasons, however long it ran. I don't think if this show were to have been picked up, it wouldn't be Chloe Bennet in Powerpuff. I mean, she's still very much a series regular of television series. I don't know, based off of her work that I saw, I'm like, I don't know if she is. I think she needs that supporting cast around.
That's a separate conversation, but I hear you. Yeah.
But that's the thing is, like, I don't know if those opportunities would have presented themselves based off of her past work. I mean, and also in terms of the scheduling conflicts, like, I do think that is a possibility. I mean, like, they tried the pilot once, it didn't go. Maybe her team is kind of like, hey, we don't want to wait around to see what if for it not to go again. Like, if they have other things in the works that she can get onto right away, that's the stronger choice sometimes.
That absolutely could be true. 100%. Usually when I see anybody cite scheduling conflicts, it's usually like when a rock star says they checked into rehab for exhaustion. Like it's like, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Sure. Scheduling conflicts. Well, that's what we'll call it. I think it's more likely.
So what do you think happened?
Well, look, you've got a show. They shot a pilot. Apparently, it was bad enough that they were like, "No way, we're not doing this." But we like this idea. Let's figure out what it's going to be. Let's figure out what's wrong. More likely, in my opinion, and again, I have no knowledge of this, so you could 1,000% be correct. But my gut leans more towards wherever the show was going, whatever changes they were making, whatever the network notes were to say this is what we want it to be. At a certain point, she was just like, "Yeah, I don't want to do this. I want out. Like, I don't want to do it."
Yeah. You know, you mentioned something. I'm looking at her IMDb. She's got nothing in pre-production or anything. She's attached to nothing according to IMDb. And usually they can map out like the next 5 years sometimes for a person's career if they spin it out. So this idea of scheduling conflicts, I agree with you, Mike. I think it feels a little convenient for what's happening here. And you're right. Maybe they, as you said earlier, alluded to, Shannon, more in a more classy way than I might, maybe she doesn't have the talent to be the lead of this. Maybe they were adjusting the script to make it focus more on the other two women as well and kind of have an equal thing. And maybe that's not something she wanted to be a part of anymore, which is her absolute right if she felt it wasn't the right situation. This doesn't feel like a Ruby Rose situation where it's very clear that this was not working for anybody involved in that production, and whatever her PR people did to gracefully have her exit the show, people in Hollywood know what actually happened. And so that's a separate situation. But this doesn't feel like that. This feels like maybe the pilot didn't go. Maybe there's tension on the set. Maybe there's frustration between the actresses or between the production staff. And then they reworking this pilot. And she just didn't want to stick around, or maybe she just didn't like the way the direction it was going and she was going to be doing less. And so she walked. And I think that's her right. But I think in the end, it's for the best. Go and lead a law show or something. Go and be the lead. prove to people, because I loved her voiceover work in Abominable. I think she actually did a damn good job at Abominable. So I think there's opportunities for her to step out and shut a lot of people up, including me, about her what we think are possible limits to her talent. Go and shock the world. Go and kick some ass in a series where you're the lead. And then who knows where you go from there, because there's a strong contingent of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans who believe she should make the jump into the MCU with her character. So if she goes and kicks ass on a series, that drumbeat becomes even louder to bring her into the MCU. And then the sky's the limit at that point.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think for me, the thing that I find more curious about her walking is what it may or may not say about just the entire project in general.
Yeah, fair.
You know, kind of like what I was saying about the Wednesday Addams show. It's like when you take something and go with a drastic departure, like that. Sometimes that is the recipe for massive success. Take like Thor Ragnarok as a perfect example of that. You're like,
Right.
Not what we were expecting. Definitely what we want now. So
Right.
like sometimes when you do something drastically different, you get a big win. Like you just knock it out of the park. And sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know if we wanted that. Like that maybe was a little step too far. And the entire concept of like doing a live action Powerpuff Girls where they're grown up and they have got feelings about what their life was like as kid superheroes, like that as an idea is like, there's the potential for that to be, holy shit, that's awesome. And there's the potential to be like, whoa, that was a big mistake. And so, you know, her leaving, the fact that we're on round 2 of the pilot, it doesn't mean that it won't, at the end of the day, come out and be like, holy shit, they really put the work in and they really nailed this thing. And maybe, to your point, it won't be Chloe Bennet. They'll get a new Blossom in there and we'll see the show and we'll talk about it on Geek Buddies and we'll be like, we love it. I can't imagine anyone else except X being Blossom. It was probably good that she left. Or this thing will continue to be problematic and fall apart, and we'll look back on this and be like, yeah, she probably got out in time.
Yeah.
There's actually, in the article, there's a quote from Mark Pedowitz, who's the CW chairman and CEO, and he's talking about the earlier iteration, and it says, sometimes things miss, and this was just a miss. We believe in the cast completely. We believe in Diablo Cody and Heather Ranier, the writers, and we believe in the auspices of Greg Berlanti and Warner Brothers Studios. In this case, the pilot didn't work, but because we see enough elements in there, we're going to give it another shot. We didn't want to go forward with what we had.
Well, there you go. It's a very strong and honest statement. We appreciate that. All right, so we'll keep our tabs on it, see what happens, see what Chloe Bennet does, where she pops up next, and who's going to step in for. And I imagine they've got to cast this thing in the next month or so, right? Because I mean, if you're reworking the script and you have these other 2 actresses on hold, and all the people, the other recurring actors that they were going to have on hold to play these characters, you want to get into production as soon as possible once that script is done. So I'm sure casting is going on right now, but we will keep tabs on it. And if there's an announcement coming down the road, we'll do it here on the show for sure. All right, let's take a quick break here, and then we're going to jump into our main topic, talking about what's coming in the world of animation for Marvel after the debut of What If. We got some news and some stuff to talk about with that. We'll be right back right after this.
What If doesn't have a theme song that I know yet?
Mike, I feel like we gave him crap for not repeating himself, and so when he repeated himself now, I feel bad that we gave him crap for repeating himself, because I feel like he shouldn't have repeated himself. What do you feel about this?
I feel like the man's out of focus. Let's just cut him a break. He's having a rough day.
Am I still out of focus?
I don't want to kick a man when he's down and fuzzy.
That's fair. That's fair.
This all started because there was an awkward pause, and I hummed "Girl from Ipanema." I did it a couple of weeks. I did something different, and when I stopped, I was the firing squad. The peanut gallery starts.
I'm on
shooting arrows.
You know,
I'm on your side today, man. I'm trying to help you out.
He's trying. He's trying to help you out. All right, let's move into this conversation, our main conversation, talking about Marvel Studios' plans for multiple, this is according to an article in Variety, multiple new animated series following the debut of What If, getting it from Adam B. Very, who wrote this for Variety. This is, we're hearing from a number of sources within this article about what they're going to do next here for Marvel Animation. Brad Winderbaum, who is he's executive producer of Black Widow and What If, spoke about this and said that there are multiple animated series in various phases of development for Disney Plus, on top of a second season for What If, which is, I think, already been announced, and a series of photoreal animated shorts centered on Baby Groot that are already both in production. Winderbaum says the company was driven by the recognition that the creative freedom demanded by What If, including staging new versions of major action sequences from just about every movie in the MCU, is only possible through animation. We realize that there's a lot of cool avenues you can explore with animation. Any project that we create is going to be something that needs to be animated in order for the story to be told. There's very little desire to take a piece of IP that's popular because we're coming out with a movie and just making an animated show about that. We're not going to do that. So, Michael, there's more here within the article as well, which we'll get to as we talk about this subject. What do you think about this? Because DC and Warner Brothers have really paved the path on the animated side of things with their movies and their TV shows. Marvel, mostly their TV shows. So what do you anticipate coming forward from Marvel in this avenue of animation?
Well, it's interesting because I think you're absolutely right. I think, common geek sort of, not everyone, I know we all have different opinions, but common geek opinion is, in general, Marvel kills it on the live action movie side and doesn't really have the best as far as their quality of the animated TV series they have. And DC has the way better animated series, and the live action side needs to maybe figure out a little bit what lane they're in. Like, that seems to be the common thinking. And I think with What If, Marvel's taking a giant leap towards redefining what animation means for your big mega brands. And what I mean by that is kind of what Winderbaum says in the article about, we're not going to just do animated series because we have a big movie coming out, we want to have the cartoon on it for kids. Because that's been, for the most part, the way that animation in superhero shows has worked. I mean, sometimes the results are great. Like, we got a Batman the Animated Series because there was Batman live action movies coming out, and they wanted to sell Batman toys to young kids, and so they wanted to have a cartoon on. So the common thinking is, there's a Guardians of the Galaxy movie coming out, there's going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy animated series on Disney XD. There's a Spider-Man movie coming out. We'll do a Spider-Man series. And the series is a different story, different characters. The characters' origins are a little bit different. Like, it's never a one-to-one. And I think that Lucasfilm should get credit for the fact that they were the first people to kind of put a stake in the ground and say Clone Wars is canon. That was the first time that an animated TV show came along and said, this is the same part of the universe, and the live action show and there's no distinction between them. And what Marvel's doing with What If is taking a big step in that direction. They're kind of moving past what they have been doing, which is exactly what Winderbaum says, which is there's an animated series because we have a live action movie, and said, we're not doing that anymore. We're now telling stories in animation that are as elevated, important, and we're putting the same amount of care and creativity into them as we do with all the rest of our Marvel stuff, and it's all part of the same universe. And I think that's pretty interesting to me, like that. And when you look at the quality of What If, that you can really see that. And by the way, I'm not saying that the quality of the Marvel, obviously, I know a lot of people. I think you guys both know a lot of people. We know people that worked on a lot of the other Marvel shows, the Disney XD shows. I've worked on shows like that. The people working on those shows are super passionate. It's never those people that don't want to make the best show possible, but maybe it's sometimes the studio, the budget, the schedules that allow them to maybe not be everything that they could be. And clearly with What If, that's not the case. Clearly they're putting that amount of time and care into it. So I think it's really interesting because everything that Kevin Feige is doing is part of the Marvel Universe, and it's going to be interesting to see how they continue to tell animated stories that weave in and out of that and how that is. What If, it's pretty clear what that is based on where we ended with Loki, but what other projects would be and how they can explore different parts of their universe or some other characters in the world of animation and how that kind of dovetails with the live action movies.
Yeah, Shannon, I like Michael's last point here, this idea of what they do next, because, I mean, with What If, you've got, it's almost like Game of Thrones, the first, 6 seasons, 7 seasons. They've got a book as a source material. What If has the MCU movies as the source material. Going forward without that stuff, what are they going to have on the animation side that will be original and new and different and explore characters that we haven't seen yet, either live action or animated, that will open the door to what they can do and possibly be canon? What do you think about all that?
I mean, it's we're seeing what Phase 4 is becoming, mainly through the Disney Plus shows. You wonder at what point, because you are operating within the confines of the MCU. Like, there are going to be things you can do, there are going to be things you can't do. Very clearly, like we know from watching the Disney Plus shows, like, there are things that people are going to need to see in this to understand in the movies. Like, is that going to be the same thing that's going to happen with some of these animated series? I mean, they talk about the Baby Groot shorts. Baby Groot on the Milano or whichever ship, the Benatar, there are so many adventures Baby Groot can have that are not going to affect the outcome of the MCU. In terms of like an elongated animated series, that's going to be really interesting. And I don't think they would have taken this leap if they weren't ready for it. If they didn't have an idea of where they were going to go. I mean, watching What If, or at least the first episode, there were so many adventures after watching First Avenger that I'm like, God, I wish we would have. Like, I love the Captain America trilogy as films. There are so many other adventures I would like to have seen in World War II.
Yes.
Is that material you can mine from? Are there adventures, smaller adventures that don't necessarily affect the bigger outcome of the MCU that they're going to be able to tell, but are still great stories? I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. What If Season 2 we were all excited for, but the fact that they are kind of doubling down on animation, it's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of that, the What If series, Brad Winderbaum went further, and speaking about the budget of the show, he said this isn't a giant budgeted series. We figured we'd go out to the talent and we'll see what we can get. If we get a few, it's great. And I was, of course, worried that we wouldn't get anyone. And he said he estimated about that 85% of the people came back to come back to voice over their characters. And I'm leading to something here. Robert Downey Jr. didn't come back. Chris Evans didn't come back. Scarlett Johansson, I don't know if she's ever coming back. Tom Holland, Zoe Saldana, and Elizabeth Olsen all didn't come back. Is there a possibility, Michael, down the road that they do come back in an Iron Man series, in a Captain America and the Howling Commando series, in a possibility Black Widow and Hawkeye series? Is something possible here with some of these? Even you could do a Nebula Gamora series with those two going on adventures in space. Is there a possibility where those actors do come back and voice over their original characters, and it's less time consuming than being on a set and doing all the makeup and doing all this kind of thing? Is that possible?
Sure. I mean, look, given the amount of time it would have taken these actors to do the voiceover work for What If, I'm assuming that it was not scheduling conflicts. I'm assuming that there was well, here's how much money we want, and you're like, can't do that. And so, but I do think to your point, look, if What If takes off the way that, after watching the first episode, I'm pretty sure it's going to do, and becomes super popular, and it kind of leads to this like floodgate opening to Marvel animation, absolutely. Look, I think that either it will be worth Marvel and Disney's pocketbook to pay Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans or Tom Holland to come in and do something, or those people, as part of their contracts for their next phase of Marvel movies. Like, there's a lot of ways that it could probably potentially happen. But also, I think what we saw, I think it's great when you have the same actor doing the voice. Like, I know we're not to get into spoilers on What If, but we all know that Haley Atwell plays Captain Carter. Yeah. Hearing her play Captain Carter is delightful, and it makes it feel like that's my Captain Carter. But Josh Keaton did a really great job as Skinny Steve Rogers. He did. And I was like, I recognized that it wasn't Chris Evans, but it didn't throw me out of the fact that I still felt like that was my MCU Steve Rogers. So I think that it's great when they can get them. I think particularly when we get to the episode with T'Challa, having Chadwick Boseman get to that, like, that's going to be really lovely to get to hear him beat T'Challa one more time. But I think that as they continue with animation, we're also seeing that it's not a barrier to being able to enjoy it. If I see a Tony Stark that's not Robert Downey Jr., but it feels like Tony Stark, I'll be happy.
Yeah. Shannon, what do you think about this? Do you think it's possible?
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Oh, Shannon, you're not fuzzy anymore. Shannon, you look good. Oh, you look so handsome.
Good job.
I saw somebody tweeted at Dave Bautista asking him why he wasn't voicing Drax, and he tweeted back, or he retweeted, "Let's start with I was never asked."
Well,
right.
So, yeah, I mean, and like Brad Winderbaum addresses this in the Variety article, and he's like, "Look, this is what I was told, is that everyone had been reached out to, everyone was given the opportunity."
Michael, why don't you give it, after Shannon's done, give us what that means in executive speak. But yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
But I mean, I don't know. Batista seems like a pretty forthcoming
He's
guy.
a straightforward guy. Yeah.
So
if they had reached out to him, he would have known. Yeah.
I don't think he's telling tales right now, but also I think when you are dealing with a gigantic machine like this, maybe things get lost in the cracks. I don't know. It's very difficult to believe that they wouldn't have thought to have asked him. But Vogel, let's be our executive Rosetta Stone right now. based on
Wonderbaum's response, I think he absolutely believes that David Bautista was asked. I think he probably was. Honestly, it does not strike me as out of the realm of the Hollywood shenanigans that the Marvel team said to David Bautista's agents, hey, we're doing this Marvel cartoon. Does he want to be the voice of Drax? Here's how much money we have. And his agents never even told him because they were like, fuck you, no, he's not doing that. And so I think that he probably was being 100% a straight shooter when he said nobody asked me. But he probably sent that tweet and then called his agents and they're like, oh yeah, we didn't tell you about that because it wasn't enough money. And he's like, well, now I wish I had done it. Now, so I imagine, I don't see that I don't think there's any secret Drax hating controversy where they were like, let's ask everybody, but not Drax. I think they probably did ask everybody, and it probably there was some thing where somebody was like, yeah, well, let's just not tell him about it. It's no good. Let's just say no.
All right, fair. When he was asked about the other people that were that didn't come back, the big names, he said part of it I think was literally the schedule, which Mike already shot down. Kind of said maybe. I mean, I don't know. And he goes, we didn't push that hard. So that's an interesting point. I think this is where the reality of animation versus the reality of live action really comes to the forefront here. And there are limits to the budget in animation, especially if you're just taking a chance to see if this is going to work, right? You want to put that much money out there. Sorry, Mike.
I think that I think you're absolutely right, and I think that probably his answer was very funny because he was like, well, the schedule, but also, I don't want to say we didn't push hard. And basically what he's saying is you're right. Even though I think What If probably has a massive budget compared to a lot of other animated shows that are getting made. It certainly doesn't have the budget of an MCU live action movie. And I think that we've all been watching these trailers for What If. We've been talking a lot about it. By the time you all listen to this or watch this, you've probably seen the first episode of What If. So we know what it is. We know that it's part of the MCU proper. We know that it's a pretty big deal. We know that we're probably going to see some of these characters pop up in live action at some point. But cut back to a year and a half, 2 years ago, when everyone was reaching out to agents and saying, hey, we're doing this Marvel animated series where it's different versions of reality and they're all going to show up. Do they want to do the voice? And it probably sounded to a lot of agents and a lot of the stars and a lot of people like it was just another kind of Marvel cartoon that you were going to see on Disney Channel or wherever. And they didn't understand fully that it was this other thing. And that combined with kind of a lower number as far as what you can afford for voiceover, probably had some people say no, whereas now while we're seeing that it's getting kind of the same level as attention and heat that the live action Marvel shows are getting on Disney Plus, probably now there's some people that are like, oh, had I really understood, I probably would have said yes.
And do you think there are certain things, because this is coming in the wake of Loki and the explosion of the multiverse, do you think there are story things that they did not share because they did not want that information out yet?
Possibly. I mean, from everything I've heard, and we'll talk about this probably more on our What If spoiler review, but from everything I've heard, What If was being made so early that even though I think they understood that the multiverse was coming and they understood a little bit of what Loki was going, like they definitely, particularly with this first season, were like, we're just telling you standalone stories. Like they probably all connect in some way, but this isn't some giant interconnected, we're going to learn everything, how it all comes together. Like I think that What If is still kind of its own thing. And like I said, I think you're right in that there wasn't a lot of like, well, Haley Atwell's gonna kind of show up in this movie or that movie. Like they're probably keeping a lot of that close to the vest, especially when they would have had to have cast this. Because like the voiceover work you do, I mean, for the animation process, like you got to do those voice actors at the beginning because that's what the storyboard artist is modeling their drawing after for the storyboards, which get turned into an animatic, which every executive can watch and make their comments on. And that is what gets sent overseas, along with all of your designs and everything else, to get animated. So like the voice is the very first thing to get done. So that got done early in the process to get to where they got today to get everything coming out on Disney+. So yeah, it was a while ago.
Well, another part of this is maybe some of these actors didn't want to come back because they're done. Like maybe Robert Downey Jr. is like, I put Iron Man to bed comfortably where it was, and it's just not, I don't want to open the door back up again. Patrick Stewart, the big story was Kevin Feige went to him and said, we want to bring you back in, and he's like, no, I put it to bed in Logan. I'm good. And so there's a possibility of that. I don't know about Chris Evans because I'll say this. No, I don't want to reveal that. I'm not going to reveal anything. But the other part of this, Scarlett Johansson, I can believe that she's busy, and I can believe that she's doing a number of other things. Tom Holland's always been an interesting cat for a lot of reasons, so I can believe that he might not want to come back and do this. Also, probably the headache of dealing with Sony and trying to navigate all of that. Probably he didn't want to jump into any of that. Zoe Saldana, I don't imagine that she's at that level with anybody else that's listed who did come back, that she couldn't have come back and voiced a role. So I find that to be very interesting. And Elizabeth Olsen, same thing. Like I think she's probably focused on multiple other things that are going on at the same time while she's also preparing for WandaVision 2 season 2 and what she's going to be in Multiverse of Madness. Sometimes you just need a break, man. Even when you're doing multiple things and then they want you to come in and voice over the character and you got to prepare it and whatever. It's a lot.
It's interesting because there was the series that all three of us worked on. The lead at one point was shooting something in Bulgaria, and they were having to patch him in.
Oh, God, that's right.
So it's like you can do it. Like it is possible. Like you don't necessarily have to be like, well, you have to come to this studio to record this. So it is possible to do it. So I hope it's not just a dollars and cents thing with some of these folks, that there were legitimate like the Tom Holland thing that you mentioned, Johnny. That makes total sense. That the Sony like that complicates it. Chris Evans, I fully believe he's put it to bed, but then your tease is now leading me to think other things.
I don't know.
You do.
No, I don't. I don't. And the tease isn't about Marvel. I want to make that clear. I have not seen Chris Evans. I have not seen Chris Evans or heard Chris Evans doing Captain America or appearing as Captain. None of that. So I just want to make sure that's very clear. I don't want anybody saying that I teased anything that was not. I'm just saying what I'm saying. And so let it be
saying what you're saying. You're saying what you're saying.
I'm saying Chris Evans is you're going to see Chris Evans soon in something.
By the way, this is what John Rocha's like when he plays poker.
Yeah.
I'm not making any faces, but
Are you sure you want to play that card? All right.
I'm not saying I got 3 aces.
I just like alliteration. Let's see here. One last quote here. This is from Winterbomb. He said, all of our animation ambitions are going to still be under Marvel Studios, which means they're going to be produced by Kevin Feige, and they're going to be born of the same stuff that makes the rest of our content. And yes, like the rest of the MCU, they will all be connected. That's the author saying that of the article. And then he continues, Winterbomb does, how will they be connected? Well, time will tell as the story of the multiverse unfolds. So if Feige's involved, he's mapped out a bunch of animated series and where they're going to go and all of that on a board, So if that's what I think is happening here, is they're saying, well, we're going to see what's going on and seeing how people react. but they're already planning for the possibility of it being a really successful thing, which I think What If is going to be, as Michael alluded to earlier. So I'm curious to see what Marvel characters now get the animated treatment versus the live action treatment. And if they are animated and live, will it be the same person? Will the story still be connected? And will they reference things from animated series in the live action theatrical features? I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a couple things that I wonder that I'm curious about, and I think they could go either way. Is one, is the style of What If going to be the house style for Marvel? If everything in the multiverse is a What If thing, if they continue to tell stories just in the multiverse, let's just say that everybody flips out for Marvel Zombies. And they're like, fuck it, we're doing a full series of Marvel Zombies. Well, if that's going to spin out of What If, is that the style of the show? Or are they going to experiment with different styles down the road?
Yeah.
Also, is the world of animation for Marvel right now simply a multiversal world? Like we will explore the multiverse in animation because it gives us the most freedom to kind of do different things with our characters and create different worlds. Or kind of to your point, John, are we going to get a spin-off series? Like, are we going to get a spin-off series of different Ravagers in Guardians of the Galaxy that we might see in Guardians 3 but not know about? But then they'll say, hey, on Disney Plus, you get to explore the rest of the story of the Ravagers. Like, and then will that have a different style than What If? So, I mean, they have a ton of options. There's a bunch of ways that you could do it, but I think there's a lot of potential there. And I hope that they continue. You know, Star Wars kind of works under the benefit of the fact that Star Wars hops eras. So, like, we know, like, oh, well, Clone Wars kind of filled in the gaps from over here, and Rebels was this gap, and now Bad Batch is this gap, and the animated series are kind of filling in the past as the live-action series are kind of pushing us towards the future. And that seems to be, at least so far, the way they've done it. Like, I don't think that we're anywhere close to seeing, like, a series that fills in the gaps between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. They could, like, they absolutely could do that down the road. But right now, it seems like they've sort of like, hey, animation is for this part of the universe on the timeline, and live action is for this. Marvel's kind of telling all these stories at the same time. So I don't know if maybe the multiverse is kind of their version of that cutoff point, or if they have plans for other things. And I think either way could be really, really interesting.
Yeah. Just to give you a little bit of credit to the animation studios involved in What If: Flying Bark Productions in Australia, Squeeze Animation Studios in Canada, and Blue Spirit in France all worked on the What If series here to create the, quote, unique aesthetic. And Winterbaum was asked about whether he'd work with Pixar or Disney Animation, and he said, quote, it's something that we'd be open to under the right circumstances. It all depends on the project. I mean, wow. A Pixar version of a Marvel character or group would be incredible. A Disney animation one would be incredible as well.
Technically, Big Hero 6 is that,
but
more Disney than Marvel. Like, Big Hero 6 is absolutely a Marvel property that kind of got absorbed into Disney animation, but I think very much kind of came out at the end result as very much a Disney movie and not a Marvel thing. I think the idea of Disney or Pixar kind of stepping in and saying, well, we are going to play in the MCU is a different proposition than Disney Animation taking a Marvel property and kind of putting it through the Disney Animation process. Like, it's a very different thing and could be down the road really cool.
Yeah, agreed. Shannon, any final words on this?
Well, you know, we've talked about that last Comic-Con that we got to go to, and how Marcus and McFeely did a panel, and they were showing snapshots of the dry erase board where they had, like, all right, this is how we're putting together the time heist, and it was pretty expansive. I mean, they had basically baseball cards of all the characters that they could use. I can only imagine what that dry erase board looks like now, because, you know, we have the stuff that we know they're doing, we have the stuff that the movies that are coming, and then you have an entire section possibly devoted to the animated series and how that's going to connect here, and this is going to do this. I mean, it's giving me a headache as I speak.
Also, I mean, they've got to live by these decisions to decide, well, okay, here's a character. Do we want to go animation or a live action series with this character? What are we going to do? So that could be very interesting as well.
That's a really good point. I mean, it kind of speaks to the fact that despite the fact that Marvel clearly plans well in advance to get to where they're going to for the story to stay connected the way that it has, animation does add that new wrinkle because the production timeline is so much longer. It takes such a long time, which means that if you are planning things in your animation and they need to sync up with what's happening in live action, you got to put a stake in the ground real early. And I think so. Like, I think, for example, with What If, like, that's a broad enough stake that they're like, we know that we're going to open the multiverse. You guys can tell some of those stories. But the closer they get to things having to really sync up the way that the rest of the live action Marvel universe does, like, that's going to be another little bit of fancy footwork that I'm sure they can do. They've proven that they can do it already, but it definitely adds another wrinkle.
Yeah, we shall see. All right, well, let's. I think that's a good discussion. Good place to stop here. Thank you to everyone who watched or listened to this episode of the Geek Buddies here on the Outlaw Nation channel, but also on our separate podcast feed as well. We appreciate it madly. Shannon, what do we have to tell them?
Yeah, I'd like to follow us on social media. On Twitter, it's @geek_buddies. On Instagram, @the_geek_buddies. If you'd like to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's @Shannon_McClung. On Instagram, @Shannon the Geek Buddy. If you would like to follow Mr. Vogel, it is @MK2. And if you would like to follow Mr. Rocha, it is @The Rocha Says.
Mikey?
Well, you know, if you are an animated fellow or an out of focus chap like Shannon McClung, we are happy that you're not out of focus now, Shannon. You're very handsome. You're very handsome. You look great.
You are. You know.
Look at that smile. Come on, give us a smile.
Oh, no.
Well, if you want to make Shannon's frown turn upside down, here are some things that you can do for us. Hit that like button below. Subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page. Leave us comments. Like, what do you think? Like, what Marvel animated series would you like to see? What do you think of Tim Drake? What do you think of the Addams? What do you think of the Powerpuff Girls? Like, let us know below. We love checking out your comments and seeing what you guys think about all this stuff. If you are listening to this on Anchor or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I'm really sorry you missed Fuzzy Shannon. But beyond that, please leave us some stars, leave us some comments so that we can go up in the rankings and more people can find us. And of course, the best thing that you guys can do is retweet this video, post it on all your socials, let everybody know that the Geek Buddies is a fun, rock and rollin' place to talk all the latest geek news, and we would very much appreciate it.
There you go.
And sometimes a little out of focus, apparently.
You are now. That's for sure.
You are now.
The timing was perfect. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time with another. Oh, don't forget, we've got our spoiler review of episode 1 of What If coming, and we've got a spoiler review of the finale, the last 2 episodes of the first season of The Bad Batch coming up this Sunday, 5 p.m. PT. We're going to announce it, but 5 p.m. PT. We're going live with Laura Kelly, the 3 of us doing that. And Emma Fife is joining us for the What If spoiler review, which will be dropping as well. All right. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time on another brand new episode of the
Geek
Buddies!